All right, it's week 9 of the fantasy football season and a lot of action today on Sunday. I'm going to break things down, give you guys the lessons I learned from week 9 of the fantasy football season. Let's hop into it. All right, first up, how about Commanders wide receiver Terry McLaurin? Is he the most underrated wide receiver in the NFL? My guy doesn't get any sort of the love he deserves. He's been a consistent player year in and year out, and this year he ranks as the wide receiver 9 currently. But if you take out his first 2 weeks where we had rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels getting into the swing of things, he's been a monster. Double-digit points in every single game, and only one game under 15 points in that stretch. Had another 15.9 today. Only 2 catches, but 2 touchdowns for you. He's been an absolute monster out there, and this Commanders offense as a whole has been really, really good, and it's anchored by a true number 1 wide receiver, Terry McLaurin, that you could have got this guy, 6th, 7th, 8th round? Who knows? It felt like Terry McLaurin was always falling in drafts, teams trying to avoid it, maybe kind of worried about what they were going to look like with rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels. But Terry McLaurin is always money, always reliable. He catches everything that's thrown to him. And yeah, he's just in for another monster season down the stretch. This is a guy I want on my roster. Okay, lesson number 2. Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson, maybe the MVP of fantasy this season. He's been absolutely incredible. Ranks number 1 at quarterback, the number 1 overall fantasy player. And he's a guy that we expected some good things from Lamar, but I don't think we expected this. Another solid 23.6 today, 24 last week, 34 the week before, and he has had no real dud games. 17 points are his lowest performance, and that was week 2 against Las Vegas. Other than that, it's been all flying high, above 20 points every single week and above 30 points most weeks except for one. He had a 19.92 against the Commanders. But Lamar just keeps going out there and balling, man. If you drafted Lamar Jackson, even drafting a quarterback early, which I'm not necessarily a huge fan of, it is paying massive dividends. Lamar is single-handedly winning you games each and every week, and he's probably going to get you into the playoffs and might easily bring you home a championship. We might have to start reevaluating how we look at quarterbacks in fantasy football, because if you look at the top end of these drafts, you had guys like Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, guys who get hurt, guys who don't produce at a level like this, and we let these quarterbacks slide down there. And like I said, you look at Lamar and he's been the top fantasy guy all season long. So maybe we should just take Lamar Jackson, number 1 overall, and ride with it. There's little to no risk, it feels like, at this point with a quarterback of his caliber, because it's just such a crapshoot at the top of fantasy draft is. But when you have a guy like Lamar, you're never going to go wrong. You're always going to be fine. You're going to get that consistent output, and your ceilings are absolutely amazing with him. Lamar Jackson, my MVP so far. Okay, lesson number 3. How about Chargers wide receiver Quentin Johnston? Kind of a meme last year of how abysmal and terrible he was his rookie season. Kind of in a bounce back. Now, he missed the last 2 games, but had a huge day today, 22 points, over 100 yards and a touchdown. And he had some other good performances this year as well. 22 points in week 2, 12 points in week 3, had 2 touchdowns week 2, a touchdown in week 3. He got hurt against Denver in week 6. That's his low. Before that, Kansas City, also a low game. But he's kind of worked himself into, he's not a meme anymore. I spot started Quentin Johnston this morning, and he did great for me. I think this Chargers offense is really starting to get their legs under them. I know Cleveland's secondary was pretty banged up, but they have a balanced rushing attack. Justin Herbert is as good of a quarterback as anybody, and it looks like, Lad McConkey's being implemented in this offense. We get Palmer back, so Quentin Johnston's a guy who's going to have these big explosive plays. 5 targets, 4 catches for 118 and a touchdown. That's excellent if you're getting him out of your flex position. But I think kudos to Quentin Johnston. I think he's kind of shaking the bad rack he got. He deserved it last year. People were high on him. We thought he was going to be a productive guy, and he just couldn't catch the football. It was letdown after letdown, and he was kind of a meme coming into the season. But I think he's been, a viable option for you a few weeks there. Let's see if he can keep up this consistency. A guy like this, maybe it gets a little bit too roller coastery, but the highs are really high for Johnston, and I think we're going to see more consistent production if he can stay on the field. So good for him. I like a comeback story. Quentin Johnston, not so much of a disaster anymore. Okay, how about lesson number 4? Falcons running back Bijan Robinson is that premier workhorse running back that we all hoped he was going to be. He's currently RB4, but he's been on an absolute tear. 4 consecutive 20-plus point games for Robinson and back-to-back weeks with 7-plus receptions and targets. So he's getting involved in the passing game more and more. Only has 5 touchdowns on the year. We want to see that number jump up. We want a little bit more consistency from him, but he hasn't done anything crazy with touchdown-wise, and he's still that productive at running back. He's been chunking off yards. He's been catching a lot, and this Falcons offense is starting to hum. 27 touches for Robinson today. We had 20 last week, 24 the week prior. This is what we want to see out of Bijan. Bijan is that guy. He is an elite tier running back. Some people were drafting him as high as number 1 overall, hoping, praying that we could finally get this from him. And it looks like they're starting to find their stride. And the Falcons schedule is really not super difficult moving forward. They play in obviously the worst division in football, arguably the NFC South. A lot of bad defenses there. So still has to play another game against Carolina. He's going to play the Saints again. They're a disaster. I think he has to play the Saints twice. So Bijan could easily finish his RB1 here, and that's what you love to see. Finally getting all those touches we expected from him, and he's producing like we all knew he could. So Bijan Robinson, your true workhorse running back for the Falcons. Okay, how about a shout out to Tony Pollard, who's been just super solid for us this season. Another double-digit performance for him today. That makes 2 in a row. He's only had 2 games without double-digit points this season, and he's had it high as 18.8, had an 18.4 today. And he really getting involved on the ground in the passing game, 128 yards rushing today. And he only has 3 touchdowns on the season. He's not even a huge touchdown kind of guy. And people were kind of hesitant on what to think with this Titans team. Tony Pollard, obviously, all the expectations in the world last season in Dallas, and he didn't get it done. He was kind of a bust. I will say it. He was an absolute bust last year. So he kind of slid a lot in drafts, but he's just been so consistent as an RB2 and definitely as a flex play. He's been awesome. And no matter how bad the Titans are offensively, defensively, getting killed, they did win today. He just can chunk off yards even against the best defenses. 14.7 points against Detroit last week. His only real bad game was against Green Bay in week 3, but his defense couldn't get off the field. That was a short, quick game. And now since Mason Rudolph's been at quarterback, he's looked really sharp. 17.8 against Indianapolis, 8.5 against Buffalo, 14.7 Detroit, and 18.4 against New England. Since Rudolph has taken over at quarterback, it's been a really strong growing for Pollard. And I think you just gotta love a guy who is a bust last year. He falls in drafts, people sleep on him, and he's been a really strong, excellent running back number 2 or a flex pay for you guys. So keep riding with Tony Pollard. He is now Mr. Reliable. Okay, next lesson learned. Doesn't matter how awful the Saints are on offense, how awful they are as a football team. Alvin Kamara is an elite fantasy running back, RB number 2 right now, and he's been excellent all season. Only under double digits once, and it was an 8.4 3 weeks ago against Denver, and Denver's defense has been really good, and they were fielding a JV offense, but other than that, he's been an absolute stud. Had a high of 44 in week 2, another 27.5 this week, 18.2 last week against a strong Chargers defense. And like I said, they play in this goofy division, the NFC South, not the best defenses in the world. Still has to play the Falcons twice. They're nothing scary out there. They got to play Carolina, or they finished their 2 games with Carolina. They got to play Tampa Bay still. Now, Tampa Bay's a little bit better of a run defense, but it just doesn't matter. Alvin Kamara, 29 years old, expensive. He doesn't care. He is chunking out yards. He's been good in the passing game. He runs with full heavy boxes. 30 carries today, plus another 6 receptions and 9 targets. Talk about a workhorse running back. The Saints have nothing, it feels, offensively, and now Chris Olave's out. And Alvin Kamara, the steal. Alvin Kamara was this guy we were taking early 3rd round as an RB2, potentially sliding into the later 3rd rounds. People weren't in love with Alvin Kamara going into the season, and he has been nothing short of excellent. He's been easily one of the best fantasy players that you could have drafted this year, and I think it's going to keep on rolling. It doesn't matter clearly what they do on offense. He gets all the touches, all the yards, And we just got to get him in the end zone more. Hasn't really done too much. Only 2 touchdowns since week 2 after he had 4 in the first 2 weeks, or 5 in the first 2 weeks. So we'll got to get that cleaned up. Maybe get him in the end zone more, not give it to Taysom Hill or whatever stupid thing the Saints do. But Alvin Kamara, just an excellent season for a guy that I thought maybe could have been washed. Okay, lesson number 7 for us this week. Drake Maye, a very viable fantasy quarterback for us. I mean, he's been really good in his 4 starts. Only had 1 game under 15 points, and that was against the Jets last week. And he left that game with a concussion, so he didn't even get to play the full time. He only had 6 pass attempts in that game. Another monster day for him today. I mean, 17.4 with 3 turnovers. That's a really big day. Had 84 yards rushing, or 95 yards rushing. He was running. That's what makes him so valuable. Drake Maye takes off. He adds that rushing ability to like our top tier fantasy quarterbacks in Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Even we can sprinkle in a little bit of Kyler Murray in there. Guys who can run are so valuable in fantasy football, and that's exactly what Drake Maye is. Now, got to cut down on the turnovers. Had another fumble today. Threw a late pick that lost the game. But I like the idea he was going for it. But man, his touchdown at the end of that game, he just extends plays, makes plays with his legs. And we're going to get the ball to our playmakers in New England. They're not very good, but we're going to get it out to them. I think Drake Maye is going to be a very good fantasy quarterback the rest of the season because they're just going to let him throw. They're going to let him run. They're going to use him similarly to like we saw a young Josh Allen. Now we got to hope he stays healthy, avoid that concussion. Already had the 1 concussion, another injury there, and they're going to shut him down for this season. That is the only risk. But for a guy that absolutely nobody drafted and a guy we weren't really sure was going to play this season at quarterback, I think he's a viable start week in and week out. Maybe not the highest ceiling in the world, but still a ton of consistency when he finishes the games, even with all his turnovers. Drake Maye, a solid fantasy quarterback for us moving forward. Okay, and finally, Brock Bowers, maybe the best rookie tight end we've seen. He's absolutely incredible. As bad as this Raiders team has been this year, especially on offense, Bowers just finds a way to catch the ball, rack up yards, and now finally getting into the end zone. Just his 2nd touchdown on the year today against Cincinnati, but only 2 games under double digits this season, and at a position that's been a wild crapshoot. I mean, tight end has been all over the place, and people did not want to draft Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers was sliding in a ton of fantasy drafts. People were kind of like not sure, not willing to take the risk, and he's just flat out better than most tight ends. In fact, I think he's flat out better than like every tight end playing right now. I know I'm going to catch some flack for that, but if he had any sort of competent quarterback play in Vegas, I think he would be easily the tight end 1 and lapping the field. That's how good Brock Bowers has been. So no matter what, if you took Brock Bowers, took a flyer on him, weren't sure what you're going to get, expecting kind of like, okay, maybe he's like tight end 8, 9, 10. We know how talented he was in college. You have to be through the moon. Who needs a hairline when you got Brock Bowers at tight end? He is an absolute stud this year. I think he continues to rack up the fantasy points. He's never going to let you down. He's super, super consistent. I mean, look at this, 19.3, 10.8, 15.5. Prior to that, 23.7, 16.1. Just really, really strong fantasy performances at a position, like I said, tight end, that is so variable, so all over the place. It just really helps to have a guy as good as Brock Bowers. Okay, that's going to do it for us today. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What lessons did you learn from week 9 in fantasy football? If you haven't already, drop a quick like on this video, subscribe to the channel. We got all the daily fantasy football content you guys could ever want. I'm talking your must starts at running back, quarterback, wide receiver, tight end for every single matchup, every single week, your waiver wire targets. Guys, you should go after before the trade deadline. Trade deadline's coming up in fantasy. Go ahead, get those trades in, your boom or bust players each and every week, as well as your must start defenses, our kicker tier rankings. We got it all for you guys throughout the week. So make sure you're subscribed to check out. You won't miss a thing. Look at the links down below. Again, like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.